Hi everyone, this is Mark, and when I can't build because it's raining like crazy, I usually end up playing a bit of chess in the container and chilling. If you are new here, we bought an abandoned piece of land in Poland and we are building our own house from scratch. Once the house is finished, we will move in, and I really hope you will be still around when I get my first chickens and collect those very first eggs. Today, I've got a brand new update for you, so let's get straight into it. Unfortunately, my old D-Vault was really struggling to drill a hole in the ring beam, so I decided to double up the power and grab the cheapest drill I could find in the nearest shop. Tools ready, generator running, time to climb up the walls and get another day of work done. Today, it's all about putting in the beams that will support the second floor, and for that, I had to drill quite a few holes on each side, about 10 centimeters deep each. Luckily, the new drill was working like a charm. I marked the drill bit with a tape so I wouldn't go too deep. Precision was the key. Once all the holes were drilled, I needed to make the area dust-free in preparation for the glue. I had all the tools ready for the next step: a battery powered drill with a wooden drill bit, the pre-cut threaded rods, and two component glue. I also had an axe to hammer down the rods and grab some scrap foil to wipe off any excess glue. When I bought the two component glue, I got a few extra nozzles because this kind of glue hardens incredibly fast. That's why I had to prepare everything in advance. Once the glue is opened and the two components meet, the timer starts. I had about 22 holes to fill in, ended up going through 3 nozzles. I made sure every rod went straight and carefully wiped off the excess glue, since there wasn't much room to clean it up later. I needed a perfectly flat surface under the beams, so taking the time to get it right now was essential. After letting the glue sit for a few minutes, I cleaned the surface again and coated the top of the ring beam with some tar to waterproof it. I'm not entirely sure this step was necessary, but I figured it couldn't hurt. Finally, everything was ready. I measured where the holes should go and drilled one on each side. It meant a lot of back and forth, but eventually the moment of truth arrived, and everything fit perfectly, at least this time. I wish I could say the rest went just as smoothly, but the next one turned out to be a real hassle. Somehow my measurements were a little bit off, and the beam wasn't sitting properly on the ring beam. I tried to adjust it, but it was completely stuck. I was honestly a bit confused about what to do next, but then I came up with an idea: using a car jack. I figured if it can lift a car, lifting a beam shouldn't be a problem. I managed to lift it up like that and then drilled the hole a little wider so the beam would slide into the rod perfectly. This time it worked. The fourth one went pretty smoothly, and I started feeling like I was really getting a hang of this whole process. Installing the last beam was an amazing feeling, everything finally lined up perfectly, and seeing it all work out after the earlier struggles was incredibly satisfying. Even though this first attempt was a big success, I quickly realized I'd run out of beams on the top of the wall. All the remaining ones were still down below, and I had to figure it out how to lift them up on my own. I had a few pretty wild ideas, but I didn't want to go risk dropping them or damaging any of the beams. They were way too expensive to play that kind of game. In the end, I called my friend Robert, and luckily, he was more than happy to come over and help the very next day. Before we got back to work, I had a small lightbulb moment. I was constantly climbing up and down, dropping my tools left and right. I even dropped my angle grinder once and completely destroyed the battery. So I decided to fix the problem properly. Using some leftover wood from the foundation formwork I had in storage, I cut everything to size, nailed it together, and just like that, I had a solid little platform between the beams upstairs. Nothing fancy, but it made working up there way easier and saved my tools from another trip to the ground. The next beautiful morning, my friend Robert came over and helped me with the beams. When life gives you water in the house, make it a sweeping competition, and we had a lot of sweeping. Having someone around again felt like really nice. I started to feel a little spoiled, always having help whenever something heavy needed lifting. I enjoy working alone honestly, but I definitely don't mind a hand when it's needed. In the end, all the beams were in place on the top of the house, except for one, which we will need later. Well, thanks for your help, Robert. With all the beams finally in place, there was nothing stopping me from moving forward, except the weather. Once again, rain showed up uninvited. The first half of the summer of 2025 was unbelievably wet here in Poland. I honestly can't remember a summer with this much rain so far. At least it wasn't cold, but my tools paid the price, getting soaked. I can tell you one thing, working in the rain, getting soaked and dealing with the cold would frustrate a lots of people. It's not my favorite weather to work in either, but I don't mind it. But when you're close to nature and maybe you're completely wet and still moving forward, building something for yourself, it becomes strangely liberating feeling. It has its own kind of beauty. So I just kept going and carried on. Unfortunately, I failed again, so I had to lift beam again using the car jack, widen the hole once more, and finally it fit at the end. It started raining heavily, so I had to protect my tools and covered everything I could. The overhead platform turned out to be really useful this time, since I could hide everything underneath. The rain slowly eased up, and after a quick lunch, I managed to install the last beam. Then it was time to check if everything was straight and level. We ran a string line between the last two beams and added some weights at the end, so I could double check whether it was touching the top of all the beams. I was pretty concerned at the beginning, but I was amazed how straight and leveled it was. Everything looked great, and I was really happy to leave this step behind and move forward. I decided to build an additional temporary platform up there and having some more leg space, since walking only on the beams wasn't the safest approach, and later I will need these platforms again anyway, when I start to build the roof. Before calling it a day, I wanted to finish securing the beams with washers and nuts. Some of the rods were a bit too long, so I had to cut them back. But I knocked the task out quickly, and I was ready to return the next day with full energy to continue the build. After a good night's sleep, I returned the next morning and finally I had some sunlight. I filled the generator with petrol and started to feel like I was building a swimming pool. The house was full of water again, and guess what? I had to sweep out again and again and again during the whole summer. I started measuring the gaps between the pillars to figure out how I was going to fill them with bricks. Each nut on the beam was sticking out, so I simply pressed the blocks down to mark where I needed to carve out a small hole in each one. There were some gaps next to the beams, so I filled them with glue. I really didn't enjoy filling those gaps, as it was a very slow process, but it had to be done. And then simply glued the bricks on the top. I also filled the gap between the end of the beam up to the wall surface with glue. I was ready to lay the rest of the bricks, but it went quite slowly again. There was a lot of measuring, cutting, carrying them up and carving out the bottom of each brick for the bolts. I still managed to finish the entire right side of the building. Each time a section was finished, I cleaned off the glue from the beam and wrapped up with a bit of tape just to have some extra protection. That's it for this episode, but I'll be back with a new update in 2 weeks. If you'd like to see how I build these pillars and why, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. If you'd like to support the project for the price of a coffee, the link is in the description. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Mark is out. Peace.